Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hello.
And Alex.
Hello.
Are you just copying Rachel? That's strange.
Is that what I sounded like?
I don't know.
Oh.
I think he tried to at least copy your intonation. I don't know. Yeah, it was a valiant effort. Thanks everybody for joining us today. If you've been listening recently, we've been going through each of our stories, starting from right to left if you're looking at this now. But first it was Rachel, then I got to share my story last week, and this week we get to hear Alex's story. We'll also be taking a couple voicemails from you, the listeners, so thank you for sending those in. But without any further ado, Alex, would you like to dive into your story?
Yeah, I guess just dive right in. It was a cold winter's night. December 25th, 1986 is when Alex Ela was born. The greatest Christmas present my mom said she's ever gotten. I think probably depends on the day or the year when that's a truth or not. But so born way back in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. My dad was a pastor at the time I was born, which was just a radical life change actually for him. My parents got married super young, and just not a very healthy relationship. My mom, actually, my grandma, they had to wait until my mom turned 19 because they wanted to get married, and my grandma I think she thought my dad was a scuzzball, slime ball, something like that. Some words that aren't very nice, and so would not sign away her daughter. And my dad was that, admittedly, not a great guy, and radically, God got a hold of my parents' life, and so my dad was an alcoholic, had a lot of issues in their marriage, and God got a hold of both their lives. First my mom, and then she started dragging my dad to church, and yeah, he got a hold of him, and addictions were gone, things like that, and then my dad ended up feeling a calling into ministry full time at that point. And so his parents worked and owned in small town Scottsbluff, Nebraska, owned an electronics store, and so he always kind of worked in that, helped in that when he was growing up, and kind of always had an interest in it. And then became a youth pastor in an Assemblies of God church, and started doing student ministry, which led to kind of into my story. I was born somewhere in that time, but there was a point where a gal in the youth ministry got pregnant and was going to get kicked out of her house if she didn't give up the baby. And my parents were their youth pastors at the time. They invited this gal into our house. My mom was actually pregnant with my youngest brother at the same time, so they've got a teenage girl pregnant, my mom pregnant, both of them like a month apart. And that kind of started this whole chain of events where my parents started taking in people. So they ended up becoming foster parents through that, going through all the legal stuff to be able to have this gal in the house. Started doing foreign exchange students from some people that they knew, and from there just started taking in a lot of different people from a lot of hurt, broken backgrounds that were kicked out of their houses or just not in stable environments. And so that's really all I knew as a kid growing up, from the time I was young. And then we moved to Omaha when I was 6. My dad got another ministry job here in Omaha when I was 6, and so we moved here. Ended up going to a super small private school, kind of like a classical academy type of thing, and grew up in that pretty sheltered environment. But my parents continued to, as we moved to Omaha, do foster care, and just really had a heart for people that were in really hard situations that didn't have a shot to go home or whatnot. And so my parents had 4 of us kids biologically. I was the second born, and throughout there were scattered tons of different people with heartbreaking stories. I can think of some of my siblings who ended up coming to live with us and ended up being adopted, and their parents just chose drugs over wanting to raise them as a kid. I've got a sibling who dad was murdered. One of his family members was just high on something and thought they were the Thanksgiving turkey, put them in the oven when they were a baby. They've got scars on their chest. People who have they just lost their parents to drugs and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of different stories. And for my parents, it was bringing these people in, but also hoping that the gospel could redeem and inform their lives and their stories. And so in foster care, that the hope is ultimately, that you can rehabilitate parents, or they get out of jail or whatever, and they can go back home. But that's not everyone's story. And so for some of my siblings or some of the people that lived with us, that was their story, and we've still kept in contact, and we've rooted for them and their families. But for a good number of them, that was just not their story. They were just statistics and part of the system, unfortunately. Every race, age, all of those kind of things were brought in. And our family was, I don't know the exact label, but we were kind of one of those families where if an emergency happened and they needed to just place someone, like overnight, at least temporarily, we would get a lot of people placed with us, moved out of maybe another bad foster care situation or an abuse situation, and they would just end up coming to us. I remember waking up, different mornings, and there'd be a new person at our house. And so that was kind of my life growing up, and it's just different than I think a lot of people's, obviously. My friends always loved coming to my house just for the entertainment value of knowing what was going to happen, and it wasn't all roses when you've got people that come from different backgrounds, racial backgrounds, have just baggage of their lives, and you've got imperfect people as the family that they're coming into as well. There was just a lot of disaster that happened, honestly, in some of those. There were heartaches, heartbreaks. There was unfortunate situations that one of my sisters had to live through as a result of it. And so it was a crazy, wild time. But I just always remember from being raised in that and seeing so many different people of all those races, ages, backgrounds, God just developing a heart for me for people that were broken and lost. And I've never, my friends wanted to be football players and scientists and doctors. Like, I've never felt anything beyond like wanting to be a pastor. I didn't always really know what that would mean, but that's just, I always felt like God called me into that. And then growing up, just had people kind of affirm that calling in my life from a young age, and continue to do that. And so that was kind of my story growing up. Loved the church, loved ministry, had a youth pastor that was really influential in my life. His name's Brian Gallardo, and he really took me under his wing. I got to, which this might sound crazy now because it's 2020, but like I got to travel with him. Like, he was single for a long time, and so he never wanted to travel like to places alone. And so like he would take me and like another guy in high school, and so we'd all kind of get to go on those adventures together just for accountability's sake. He didn't want to like travel alone and be able to say, people say crazy things or whatnot. And so that was kind of a fun thing that I got to do as a result of that, and kind of travel and see ministry and some pretty wild things. And so yeah, he really took me under his wings, shepherded me, and then that's what I wanted to do. I loved sports growing up, played basketball, and got to play in high school on our varsity team, and at Burke High School. Shout out to the Bulldogs, right by Christ Community. And so I had that as a passion, and always loved that as ministry, to build some of my best relationships. And so I went on to college, where I could have the best of both worlds at Grace University, where I could play basketball at small, tiny college, and also study to do ministry, because that's what I was always, told I needed to do. So did that. I went to college at Grace University in Omaha. I think we had a moment of silence for it a few weeks ago, maybe last week, because Eric worked there as well. It no longer exists. And after my freshman year of kind of doing, like, I just did it. That's what I felt called to do. That's what I felt like God was leading me. I mean, I had kind of a wild life. I didn't really realize it was not typical growing up, because it was just my life. And then the summer of my sophomore year, a couple police officers showed up to my parents' house in their nice suits and kind of like what you see on TV, and began to ask me some questions about where I was on a certain day, who I was with, and we start kind of wondering what this is about, and ask them, and they're like, "You'll see it on the news tonight." Well, that night they said that there was a girl missing from UNO, and her name was Jessica. She was missing, and long story short, my best friend growing up, that I grew up in my neighborhood with and at church, ended up being the suspect in the murder trial. So that was a wild thing for me growing up. If you want to see the rest of the story, I think it's on like one of those Netflix documentaries, so you can go watch it and decide. But the whole time I thought, there's no way this guy could have done it, and all of those things. It kind of really took me on a crazy course for a year of my life. I remember that same year, one of my siblings who I graduated with was adopted, but we were really close, same grade. Very different personalities, but ended up coming out of the closet and saying they were homosexual. And that same year, I remember picking up one of my sisters from a drug house and finding out she was pregnant and being abused and all that. And so pregnant out of wedlock. And I remember like this vivid moment of like, God, I'm not your guy. Like these, especially growing up in the church, you know, homosexual, a murderer, and someone having a baby out of wedlock, those are like the three ultimate sins, right?
You just needed someone to get divorced, and then you would have had it all.
Yeah, so and I guess since then I've known some of those. But so it was just this time where I was really wrestling with God. How could you have called me into this if these people, like, these aren't just like stories, these are like people that I love, that I'm super close to in my life, are going through these types of things. Throughout that murder trial, it was just a mess. It was a pretty big, broadcasted pretty heavily in Nebraska. The first time anyone had ever been convicted of a murder without a body, and he still is maintaining his innocence and trying to fight for it. And so it was just a really hard time going to the jailhouse, you know, almost every day, being a part of the witness, having your name in the newspaper. For a long time, if you Googled my name, that case came up, because him and I hung out the day that girl went missing, and ultimately the day that they think she was murdered. And so just all of those things kind of happening back to back to back. I was like, God, I'm not your guy. These are not, if I can't minister to these people, how in the world are you going to end up using me? And so over the course of the next year, I ended up randomly going out to Camp Rivercrest, and like, I'm going to give this ministry thing a shot. I was a camp counselor out there, and God really used that summer to slow me down, to shape my heart, to help me see the broader picture of all these things that were happening, to help me see redemptive stories in all of this, and to really break my heart for people that I grew up probably stiff-arming and judging and thinking were the worst of the worst and the lowest of the low. I was just conditioned, some by just ignorance, and by people that I think did it out of a loving way but just didn't really know. And so that year, God really I pressed into Scripture even more to figure out all of these things theologically, my positions on all of these things. And really that year, God used to both really solidify my positions and then change my posture towards a lot of these people. And so, you know, to this day, that was 10 years ago, but God's really done a work in my life and used all of those people and all those situations, including, you know, even a boss from the church that I worked at going to jail and being able to continue to do ministry. God was really setting me up and changing my heart through a lot of that. That's given me opportunities to minister to people that a lot of times are on the fringes. And so it's been a win. It's been a blessing. It's been hard. That sibling, you know, is transgender now, and so a lot of wrestling through wedding and where do I fit into that as a pastor? Should I go? Should I not go? How do I be supportive? How do I use pronouns? And all those kind of things. And you've got, you know, voices from the church telling you one thing. You've got, your internal voices and stuff you think is coming from the Holy Spirit telling you one thing, you're asking for wisdom. And so just really was able to wrestle through a lot of that and have learned to love people, hopefully well. And God just written all those crazy, wild things in my story. Sometimes I tell it, and then I get into more details and talk about TV shows and all this random stuff that my family's been involved in. And I'm like, I don't think I would believe me if I was telling me my story. And so I'll save you some of those things. Maybe you'll hear it on another podcast. But that was my life. Ended up going to finishing Grace, getting this internship right after Rivercrest at Christ Community Church. They were desperate and took a chance on me. I hadn't even finished my bachelor's, which you were supposed to. I had to finish a couple of classes. I had transferred to Nebraska Christian for a year and there, came back to Grace. It was this wild story of, a 20-year college journey. Not quite that long, but it felt like it. I ended up meeting my wife while being an intern at Christ Community. She had moved to Omaha to be a special ed teacher at Omaha South High School. We met through a mutual friend playing sand volleyball. She dug me. She hates when I say that. She actually didn't. I got rejected a lot. Met her, and she's incredible. And we got married a couple years after that, and left Christ Community after 3 years because it took me 3 years to finish a 2-year internship. I worked at a United Methodist Church, which was awesome for me. I'm kind of a mutt now, but it was very different than my upbringing and even very different than Christ Community. But my wife came from a Catholic family, and so I had no real respect or reverence or even knowledge of liturgy, and so God used that to really draw a deeper understanding for that for me. We ended up having 4 kids, and so we've got 4 kids. Our oldest son is Britton. He's 7. Quinn is 5. Lydia just turned 3 last week, and then we've got Hannah, who is 1. And Hannah's been, and you've probably heard me allude to some of her story in the last year, but she's deaf, and so that's been a big journey. She wasn't born, that way, and so there's a lot of questions around how it happened and a lot of testing to figure out if it was affecting other parts of her life. What's this mean? Are we going to learn sign language? Ended up getting cochlear implants, which are part of that, and learning even there's thoughts and opinions around everything there is in the world, and so we're on that path. She just got those implants before COVID-19, and then all her follow-up appointments have pretty much been canceled, so it's been a wild journey, but through all of this, we have just seen, and in my life over and over, seen God's faithfulness and his care and his kindness. But it's different. I've got 3 siblings that were biological, a number of adopted siblings, and all of us born in the same house, the same situations, but all of our perception and how we feel about our upbringing is vastly different. And so it sometimes sounds like, oh, this is all roses and beautiful and perfect, but there's a lot of struggles and a lot of pain that they're dealing with because of some of those things. Not resentment towards my parents. They're saints. I mean, they're the greatest people, I know, and I'm so grateful and humbled to have been raised by them. They're flawed people just like I am, but I wouldn't trade the wild, crazy adventure that I just told you, plus some other things, for anything. So here I am, student pastor at Christ Community. I guess I'm not a student pastor anymore. I was for a long time, 10 years of student ministry, and then transitioned to doing young adult stuff, and right along that way, boom, the podcast started.
Wow. That you caught us up to speed. That was very detailed. I'm glad that you didn't forget about your family like I did last week.
And I double-checked their ages.
Yeah, good job.
I'm not allowed to say my wife's age, so.
That was my follow-up question, if you could go ahead and let us know.
Her birthday is December 29th, so we have birthdays that are very close to each other. So.
Oh, that makes Christmas a little bit weird.
Yeah.
Do you always did your parents go out of their way to make your birthday special, or was it just kind of like, here's a little bit better present than your siblings got? 'Cause
yeah, I mean, I can't complain. Like there was benefits to it. Like there would be times that maybe I would get a bigger present because it was a combination than they would have gotten ever, like at Christmas or their birthday. So I can't complain. Like I like to Jesus juke it and say, I'm not the most important thing on my birthday or in my life, and it's true. So very humble of me.
Rachel, do you have any follow-up questions you'd like to ask Alex, or did he answer them all for you?
I don't know. I'm just, one thing that I was wondering is it seems like everyone around you was having their issues and their struggles and all that kind of stuff, but I didn't hear much about you maybe having some trials. I don't know. Yeah,
that year of my life, the kind of year where a lot of things were hitting the fan, and I was wondering if God called me into this. There was definitely some exploration with just, hey, a lot of things I was told not to do, so alcohol, and this was after I was 21, but those are things I was like, I would never drink alcohol. So it was some of those things. I was a Christian guy that really knew the things to say to Christian girls, and so there was a part of me that really would just go along for chases and things like that and not really take commitment seriously. It wasn't like just to go sleep with girls or anything like that, but it was a pride issue of like, I can woo this person and then I could kind of be done and not have ever really been in a relationship. So I definitely was creating some wake of pain and things like that I definitely regret and learned from, and in some relationships that were pretty significant that I made just poor choices, and so definitely am not an angel in all of that.
Yeah, that's good. I just wanted to hear all your regrets, just
she just wanted your grandma to call you later and be like, why didn't you share that part about when you were in college?
Yeah, I turned to a lot of things that I shouldn't have turned to find healing and hope, or just numb, honestly, a lot of pain. And so I just didn't have to deal with it. And so whatever way, if that was womanizing or alcohol or just being stupid and doing just stupid things, I did it. I am grateful that Snapchat and Instagram stories and all of those things were not around during those moments.
Yeah, a lot more documentation of the bad ideas. Now, Rachel, you said in your story you mentioned you're a PK too, right? Like your dad was a pastor.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So somehow
PK crew.
We just all ended up on this. That was not an intentional thing, I don't think. No. And so maybe that probably colors our worldview a lot more than we even realized, though. And I think hearing you say, Alex, that you the way you kind of knew what to say, right? Like I think that's such a PK perspective, that if people grew up that way, it's like, and I think even for me as a Christian now, I struggle sometimes with like Christianese, because I feel so much like I'm, I don't know, like I don't want people to think that I'm just saying those things to be, deceptive, or try to. My dog is barking now because
I was wondering.
Someone came.
Jesus was calling you, and then the dog was barking.
So the funny story about that phone ringing is, I have a cousin who lives in Colorado, and during the day his kids like to play with his Google Assistant or something, and Facebook calls me. And I try not to, I accepted it once, and it kind of scared them. They didn't really know who I was.
Yeah, that's good.
But anyways, I think that's one of those things where it's easy for sometimes people to be a little bit manipulative with those, behaviors and things. But yeah, it's interesting. But thanks for being vulnerable and sharing your story. The only other question that I had that's really sticking out to me is, what's the name of that Netflix documentary?
What is?
What would I Google?
Sordid Scheme. I'm trying.
Tiger King? Is that?
No, not Tiger King.
Oh,
it's called Sordid Scheme. That's the title of this specific one. They actually asked me to be on it. I rejected. I didn't want to do any interviews or anything like that.
Oh my goodness.
Because it was years later. And Forensic Files is the show. And Sordid Scheme. And so if you want to also know about my transgender sibling, they were the first person ever on Say Yes to the Dress as a transgender person. So if you want to know who I'm talking about there, just have fun on Google.
All right. So we can.
But
just
to your point,
go ahead.
Eric, I think that's always been a struggle. I think growing up in the church and knowing the power of words and how easy. Man, how dangerous it is and how easy it can be to manipulate people, especially as you ascend into whatever your imaginary thought of what power is, right? And so you can become and so those heart checks are super important around what I'm saying. And I joke around about Jesus juking and things like that a lot, but yeah, the things to say, and unfortunately sometimes those things are used to do great damage.
Yeah. And like you realize that it's all kind of, you even are deceiving yourself a little bit. Like you think that you know all this stuff and you have all this wisdom and knowledge about, your faith or whatever, and then it kind of starts to crumble whenever you get into real situations where you have to rely on your faith. So I've experienced that too. So
yeah, good stuff. All right, should we jump into a couple voicemails?
Let's do it.
All right, we got two here. The first one is from Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica, longtime listener to the Uncomfortable podcast and big fan of you all. Just wondering what your guys' thoughts are with mental health. Like, a lot of us are isolated and alone, and what are some ways that you guys are intentionally taking care of yourselves during this time? Do you have any advice for those of us that are working at home, isolated, anything that you're doing to take care of your mental health, or any advice that you could give in that area, since it's such an important thing to be aware of these days?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah. Anybody have any tips? Anything that they're doing?
I feel like I'm just learning more of how this has been hard on my mental health. Just realizing, I think it's easy to be distracted when you have places to go, things to do, busyness and stuff. And I feel like I've realized more just being home and not having as much to do, you just can start to think more and just get in your own head. And so I've just noticed, like, oh man, I actually have a lot more like anxiety than I thought, or I like really need to like make sure that I am like going to the Lord with like some of these things that I'm just like thinking about constantly. So I think I'm becoming more aware of my mental health during this time, and so I'm still trying to figure out how to handle it in this type of a situation. So
yeah, I think we kind of hit on this a little bit last week, but I think it's still so fresh that I don't know if I would have any good advice for people yet. Like I don't know that I've taken the time necessary to actually process when I'm actually I kind of still just do the same thing I've done before, just now it's all at home, because you're working from home, and then you're cooking more, you're still kind of zoning out in some of the ways you did. I know some people are zoning out more, and I think Pastor Mark mentioned it, like, what was it, a few weeks ago when we were talking about how, he said we fall into three categories with, what was it, hope, mope, or hope, cope, or mope, and I was just like, I'm such a coper. Like I just had to, kind of acknowledge it when he said that. I'm like, that's just what I do. Cause I think I'm not the one to like just go around and pout and be sad about things, but I'm also not like super hopeful about, the outcomes of what's going to happen. I think I'm just kind of in that middle, and I'm just like finding my way to cope and rationalize things. But yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, one of the big, I guess, at least last week, thematically, as we were kind of going through the Passion Week and things like that, of just thinking of like this weird time, where you're just anticipating and wanting something, but all of your plans, all your hopes, all your dreams are just hanging there, and you're kind of hoping they would happen, and they don't, but everything seems like it's getting canceled. And so for me, really, that Passion Week couldn't have come at a better time, because I felt like, man, I was living in like that Saturday or Good Friday kind of space where I'm alone, I'm isolated, I don't know what's next. Fear can start to creep in of wondering about the future of your job, of the finances, of the church, of our ministry. How long is this going to last? What are going to be the repercussions? A lot of things. You can start to draw a lot of pictures, and so there's that balance of refocusing, putting my eyes on Jesus and not that fear side of it. But then there's also for me, just looking back at my life and realizing, even preparing for my story, that God hasn't failed me. There's been moments that have stunk, and they've been hurtful and painful, but just looking back to look forward, I guess, of God's goodness. He hasn't failed, those things. And then just some practical things of like, I've just had to create things to look forward to that are a little bit more immediate. So we've been using House Party to get together with my family. And so we've actually gotten together more because we're all distanced throughout the country, not just socially distanced. So we've gotten together more, like we've been doing this once a week. And so it's fun, and doing that with my journey group. And so thinking of things, like intentionally planning things, especially for my wife and I, that are after the kids go to bed, where we can interact with friends. And so having things to look forward to, I guess I never realized before this how much that drives me, having things to look forward to. And especially I'm an extrovert and love social gatherings and all that kind of stuff. And so creating some of those things that are a little bit immediate to kind of fill that tank for me has been a win as well. So I think that's one thing.
Yeah, that's good. All right, another voicemail coming from JJ.
Yeah, I was just curious, during this pandemic time, as Christians, how do you think we should go throughout social media with all the posts regarding the COVID-19 and, with the false information, and then there's real information out there? How do you guys think we should handle that with our friends, family, loved ones, things like that? Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, JJ.
Who's got the silver bullet of advice here for how to deal with this stuff? I mean,
you do, Eric.
I know that's my title, right? Social media manager. So I just manage social media. I get it. I get it all. I understand it all. No, I think it's challenging. I found myself, like, I spent quite a few years just not engaging in Facebook debates. Like I tried to kind of just like swear that off, because it never goes anywhere good. Usually it just goes downhill. But during this, I've seen so many people posting things that are just like, I mean, it started with the drink hot lemon juice thing, and like all these other things that are just, not proven cures, and other things like that are circulating social media. And so, I was kind of like feeling like a little bit like, I mean, I have people I care about who are in those minorities that this could affect worse than others. And it's like, when I see people putting misinformation out there, I was taking it kind of personal, I think, because I'm just like, okay, why are you encouraging people to not treat this seriously, and you're endangering especially people with compromised immune systems and things like that. And it's just across the board, even with like, the miracle cures and all these ideas that people have. You get these big debates that happen, and it becomes political, and it becomes personal, and it's not an easy situation. Like I think it would probably be better to not engage with it. I know I did with a couple posts even in the last couple of weeks, and I was just like, I think I was having more anxiety about the conversations I was having on Facebook than I was about the actual, pandemic, just because I'm just like, what are people thinking, And I always struggle when people are very like definitive about their answers to things, especially stuff that we don't have all the answers to, where this is like, this is something new. It's something that it's very unprecedented, and we don't have answers to it. So to just kind of blanket statements that get put out there and people share, whatever side you fall on, whether people are against social distancing or against whatever, or they're really for it or whatever. I mean, or they're saying, oh, these predictions are wrong, and so, this was all a big mistake, or, you see all this stuff coming up, and it's just like we don't have the information to know who's right or wrong at this point. We don't have the information to know what's going to actually help cure this virus. So there's just not enough information out there, and I think when people are trying to say they have the answers, it's really scary. And there's stuff going around too. Like, one thing, I mean, as a social media manager, that I definitely know about social media is the way that advertising works on social media. And a lot of it is, you'll see these videos that just seem like, hey, it's just some average Joe, hey, this is friendly chiropractor or whatever, who's just like sharing his miracle cure that he just happened to stumble upon. And it's kind of the modern day snake oil salesman, and it's one of those things where they're making them personable. They feel honest, they feel believable, because it's like something you could have done in your living room or something. So you want to believe it, but then you start clicking through to their pages and you find out that, oh, there's this whole Facebook page around his business, and then you go further to his website, and he's, they're selling these vitamin packages that you'd have no idea what they do or if they're safe for you, and so it's just that thing of like, people need to realize they're being manipulated, and you got to kind of pay attention to that. And I don't, and so sometimes I think I'll get outspoken about it, because I'm just like, no, don't give into this. Like, please don't. Like, you're being manipulated, and I care. You care about your friends and family, and you don't want to see them do that. Lately, I've kind of tried to step back from it and just quietly report misinformation that I find on Facebook. I just report it to Facebook and be like, yeah, this is not true, and hopefully they take care of it. But yeah, I don't know if you guys have, you share your input. I could go on and on. I could do a whole podcast on this subject, because I feel like I've been dealing with it for 3 weeks.
Eric has opinions. Maybe on your other podcast you'll do it. Yeah. I think for me, it's just, and I guess I've learned this because I've done things wrong. So like, if I teach or whatever, if I think I've got like a brilliant saying or quote that I'm like, ooh, that's really good and pithy, and that's fire, tweet that, then I always like Google it to see if it's right. And so I've even learned that with a lot of things is like, let's just go like see if it's truth. Like, one example that's going around a lot right now in the Christian community is like this C.S. Lewis quote from 1942, right? From his book, from Screwtape Letters. And so it was not even said by him,
right?
And it doesn't, just because it wasn't said by him doesn't mean it takes the power away from that, but it takes away some of like the maybe prophetic parts of it and things like that. But I think people read it and they feel solace in it, and it gives them hope, which is great. But then the issue is, if you confront someone on that, or how to do that gently, then it becomes an attack on their integrity and all that kind of stuff. And so that's where I've seen that quote around and seen it being misshared. And so some of the relational equity that I have to have with people is there. I think managing our church Facebook group, there's things that people share in there that are okay, but like taking COVID and I don't know, making it like some kind of, what are those called, acrostics, and like Joshua 1:9 and all that kind of stuff inside of there, which is good. I think there's good, hopeful things and redemptive value that happens in that. And so like, I'm not trying to call somebody out who finds hope in that, but it's like just the shareability and the lack of I mean, Joshua 1:9, it's not even talking about this kind of situation at all. And so so when we Jesus juke things or we make things that aren't, it really, and we think it's perpetuating our witness, we think it's giving glory to Christ, but sometimes it's actually like downgrading it and degrading it, because you don't even know the context that's there, and then you kind of look false. I got called out on that one time, and that's what's kind of pulled me into it on like a teaching where I shared a quote from somebody that I thought was really, really good, and it was powerful. but that other things that person said were just terrible, and they were not a good person. And so I think there's redeemability in that quote, but then also how you might be, how I might have been like condoning this person and all their behavior and all that by just kind of releasing that name. Especially when I work with students, I had to be careful of that kind of stuff, because misinformation can spread like wildfire. And so I think especially in the Christian community. And where's truth to be found? I think it's so hard. I think that's the hardest thing about this is there's real experts, real doctors that both have differing opinions. It's just like there's real pastors that have different theological opinions on things. But when we want truth and we're seeking truth, it's hard because we want to say why our expert's better, and it just puffs us up, and I think there's a lot of ego that's involved in a lot of this stuff.
Well, and it goes back to that control thing too, I think, because it's one of those. It's a point where a person's going, okay, well, there's this easy solution to this problem, and the answer is, oh, we blew it out of proportion, or the answer is, what some miracle drug, or the answer is whatever, and when they feel like they have that answer, it puts them in a position of control again, where they're like, see, you guys are all just silly, and you're out of control because you don't know what I know, and I got the answers. And I think it's one of those things where it is one of those things where people just it's a way for them to cope, right? It's a coping mechanism. I feel like I'm in control now, and I can, tell my doctor how to fix me if I catch coronavirus.
Yeah, I'm struggling because I have more time on my hands. So now it's like you want to start kind of researching these things, and like Alex said, you want to know the truth, but it's like, how do you find the truth? Because there's so much out there, and they have all these reasons why their thing is right, and then other people have all the reasons why their opinion is right. I was getting sucked down just like into it so much, and every single night I was getting on and looking at stuff before bed, and then I was getting anxiety because there was so much information out there, and I just realized, man, God just gave me this awesome time to get rid of some of the things in my life and like focus on something different. And I decided to fill it with more like of the world's opinions and what they had to say, and less of, maybe reading the Bible and deciding, to listen to what his truth is. And so, it's the easy thing, especially right now. It's like that's how we're connecting with people, is on Facebook or Twitter or whatever social media. And so even when you're connecting with people, you're going to see other posts as you're going through, and then you might click on it, and then it's going to take you to another post, and it's just easy to get sucked in. And so I'm just trying to find that balance of using it as a tool to relate with other people, but not to get sucked into things that people are trying to tell me to believe.
Yeah. I just want to invite people, like, honestly, if you think this is going to be helpful for, like, just stop and pray about it, maybe. Another thing I just thought of that I've seen go around is like this whole 40-day thing. And I think we like to take, a lot of 40-day, like it was like, Jesus was in the wilderness for 40 days, the flood was 40 days, and all this kind of stuff, which I think is really good, and God did awesome things. And I'm not saying that those are bad things or that we're putting a false hope, but we sometimes try to put ourselves in the narrative of Scripture, and really the narrative of Scripture, it's not about you, it's about God, and so you can't just go put yourself in there, and all of those stories are to point to God's faithfulness and his goodness and this bigger story that he's writing of redemption, and so we can find details, but sometimes we find the most random of details in some of these stories and then try to like drop them on us, like apply them to our lives, and it can just be dangerous, and like maybe it goes into what we were saying, manipulative, and give people a false sense of hope, and really just make God look bad. And he doesn't need our help doing that, because there's enough other people already trying to do that for the sake of Christianity. So maybe it's just pray about that thing that you're going to post. I would say that's always wise, but especially if it's biblical or it's something that you feel is just do the homework before clicking that share button. And maybe that feels weird because we want people to share our content, right, and our sermon clips or whatever. But I think just encouraging people, especially in this time, just stop, sit with it, pray. That post's still going to probably be there in 20 minutes. And if it's not, then that's your answer. It's probably not shareable because it's trash. So it sounds like maybe an elementary or rudimentary kind of answer, but I do honestly think it would filter a lot of the things that we're posting.
Yeah, I think people are at home a lot more now, so I think we're just seeing a proliferation of it just because of that too, more free time, and people are looking for hope, and so I try to remind myself of that too, that it's like, okay, at the root of this, even though this is kind of frustrating, like I have to take a breath and go, so people are just trying to find hope where they can find it right now, and whether they're Christian or not, they're grasping for all kinds of different things, and so just to try to have patience with people, which sometimes isn't always easy on social media, but pick up the phone too. I think that's another thing, is like if you see something that's just stupid that it's out there, maybe especially it's like a loved one and it can get your blood boiling. I've done this a few times. Then pick up that phone, like have that conversation, or Skype them or whatever, and have that conversation. If it's someone you're like close to and that relationship is valuable, then hopefully they're going to hear what you have to say. And I know I've removed some posts when people have done that to me, and I've seen some posts, be removed because of just that dialogue in the conversation. So, yeah. All right. Well, hopefully I answered your question adequately. JJ, thank you for calling in.
Another Grace University alum, so I just want to throw that out there.
Oh, thanks for doxing them as well. No, I'm just kidding. Someone, but if you want to call and leave us a voicemail, if you were inspired by these great voicemails that we've been getting, you can do that by calling 402-413-5638. I'll repeat that in case you missed it. That's 402-413-5638. Call us, leave us a voicemail, and hopefully you'll hear it on the show. But thanks again, Alex, for sharing your story, and thanks, Rachel, for hanging out with us. And it's we'll just continue to do what we do. It's been fun. If you want to reach out to us, you can do that on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can email us at podcast@cccomaha.org. We would love to hear your questions, your comments, your concerns, your topic ideas. If there's stuff you want us to talk about, let us know. I think we're open to that. Other than that, I think that's it. Anybody got any final words? No? I see a lot of head shaking saying no. Thanks everybody for watching. Until next time, we'll talk to you then.